On today's episode,
the world's greatest student, Tim Ferriss.
If you want to become a world-class learner, treat reality as negotiable. And just because something is said often does not make it true.
I'll show you how to make the impossible possible by bending the rules.
I wanted to do a show about how to become Jason Bourne. Accelerated learning, but really push it to the breaking point.
So I believe that the meaning of life, the very meaning of life, acquire as many skills as you can and put that utility to the test.
Yeah, there's nothing that comes to mind that I completely discount as totally impossible.
If I can do it, so can you.
Inside Quest starts right now.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Inside Quest. We are the breakfast club for the intellectually adventurous, and our goal here is to bring on amazing people, pry open their minds, learn the secrets that make them the people that they are, and hopefully help us develop new skills to push humanity forward. And if you're going to push humanity forward, what better guest to bring onto your show than New York Times best-selling author, power blogger, self-experimenter, and, in my opinion, the world's greatest student, Tim Ferriss. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Excited to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
So, watching the trailer for your new show, and I don't know if you'd agree that you are the greatest student of all time, but your new show certainly proves that you have the most unparalleled cojones of all time.
Or the biggest lack of self-preservation.
Also possibly true.
I think I might be the world's best professional dilettante. And along with that goes the student piece of it. But being a good student is a coachable skill. And I gave up on so many things in life, whether that was basketball. I concluded I was bad at languages in 9th grade, and so on and so forth. And I think so many people run into this where they abandon things and they accept a partial completeness, where they're like, my voice just isn't good. I'm just not good at X. And usually if you track that back, it's because a parent or a teacher or some authority figure criticized you really heavily. And it turns out that if you just get a better toolkit, sort of a better set of questions, that you can do things that seem impossible to the untrained, right? So you could teach someone to, say, memorize a shuffled deck of cards in less than 60 seconds with about 2 weeks of training. Like, you literally using the right software, you could get someone past the former American record in 2 weeks or less. But you show that to someone and it looks like a Rain Man-like skill, but it's all coachable.
Now, what I like about your new show, because honestly, and I've read the book Moonwalking with Einstein, and I mean, and it's really fascinating, and I want it to apply to other areas of my life, but it ends up, in my opinion, to be a little bit like a parlor trick.
Sure.
But in your new show, which, by the way, you should give us some context for here in a second, but in the new show, you take that concept of anything can be learned once you have the right toolkit, using your words, and you really put it to the test in just a phenomenally interesting way. And I've been watching you fight the legal battle to get this stuff released with great interest. Just real fast, walk us through, give us some context. What is the show?
Yeah, so the show is the Tim Ferriss experiment. And I guess the easiest way to think of it is sort of like a cross between Mythbusters and Jackass. And I'd said no to all television that had come my way over the last 6 or 7 years. And mostly because it was always a very contrived, scripted reality TV. But I had a really cool guy named Chris Vivian, who at the time was at Turner Broadcasting, approached me and said, if you could do anything on television, what would you want to do? And I was like, well, I haven't been asked that before. And I said, well, selfishly, I would like to make a show maybe that is about how to become Jason Bourne, because I have this obsession with the Bourne identity. I watched it about 500 times, not exaggerating, while writing the 4-hour work week. So I put movies on and mute them in the background because I write late at night and I don't want to feel isolated. So Matt Damon was like my partner in crime, co-writer of the 4-hour work week in spirit. And so I wanted to potentially do a show about how to become Jason Bourne. And then I was like, or I could do a show about accelerated learning, but really make it an action movie where I push it to the breaking point. And my sort of opinion, whether it's in the books or the TV show, or let me be the guinea pig so that you don't have to and do the crazy stuff. The last criterion was it can't be bullshit. Like, this has to be what you see is what you get, which turns out to be a stupid amount of work. Like, not the 4-hour work week. Like, you're doing 12 to 16 hours a day for 5 days straight, multiple cameras. So that's just one camera. And But to give you an idea of how it applies practically, so you mentioned Moonwalking with Einstein. So for those people who don't know the book, it's about a journalist named Joshua Foer who gets trained in, I guess it's about a year or less to become national memory champion. And his coach, or his primary coach, is a guy named Ed Cook. So Ed's also a friend of mine. And I like to accumulate these people. Ed is hilarious, and he's just an amazing mental athlete. And so one of the episodes was learning languages. So this skill that I had previously thought I was bad at. I had quit Spanish class in I guess it was 10th grade, and I had 3 to 4 days to try to learn Tagalog, Filipino, from scratch, well enough to go on TV like this and have a live interview in Tagalog. Don't recommend that if you want to avoid nervous breakdowns, but we were able to kind of demonstrate what someone who was previously bad at languages can do with the right set of tools. And so Ed was one of the coaches and gave me some memory techniques that are absolutely applicable in regular life. So it's definitely about kind of news you can use. But what I've seen in, say, like the 4-Hour Body is people just accept, like, wow, my mom and dad are fat, this is blah, blah, blah. I'm always going to be this way. And the genetics, most genetic limitations are nothing of the sort. And you can really kind of renegotiate that stuff.
Right. You've got an awesome quote about that. Except for the laws of nature, everything in reality is negotiable.
Yeah.
And I love the way you say everything in reality. So it gets to the heart of the fact that reality is a construct, right? So once you start conceptualizing of the brain as this organ trapped in total darkness, because people think, what do you mean trapped in total darkness? You've got eyes, you see eyes, but the light never makes its way to the brain, right? You get an electrical impulse that makes its way to the brain, then the brain reconstructs this world, and hey, it's a pretty consistent reconstruction. I can navigate my way around without smashing into too many coffee tables. Right. But at the end of the day, it's really a representation. And once I think people understand that it is a construct, now you fall into the movie I've seen, maybe not 500 times, but a lot, The Matrix. And once you realize that reality is a construct, you can manipulate the rules and you can do things that other people can't. And that, for me, is the reason that I wanted to do the show was, people look at you and they think, okay, well that's okay for Tim Ferriss, right? He's this sort of uber freak, and I've seen the attacks that people launch on you, by the way, for like when you added the muscle, and people are like, yeah, well, he was a wrestler in high school, so he had the musculature there, it was just dormant. All that stuff, all to just explain you away, rather than like what we try to do here at Quest, which is, tell me more. How did you manage that? Because if even some small percentage of that is doable, I want to be on board with that. So once you understand that you can bend the world to some extent to your will, a lot of really new and interesting things become possible. And that's what's really captured my imagination about your show. If you guys haven't seen the trailer, just go watch the trailer. It's like 6.5 minutes. It was amazing from beginning to end. Literally, you're doing like the House of Cards style, right? It all launches right at once.
The whole season is available at once right now. And then there's as much bonus footage if you get the season pass on iTunes, the Tim Ferriss Experiment. And I'll just give it out. People can check it out at itunes.com/Tim Ferriss with 2 R's and 2 S's. But you hit the nail on the head in so much as you're the average of the 5 people you associate with most. That's like a basic tenet of my life and Silicon Valley where I live. And my other career, and we don't have to get too deep into this, but is investing in early stage startups. And I've been very successful in that. And it's more my financial career than the book.
Do me a favor and just throw out some of the things you've invested in. It's absurd.
Yeah, it's I've had a lucky streak. So Twitter, Facebook, first pre-seed money advisor to Uber, first advisor to Evernote. I think I was the first advisor to Shopify, which just filed for IPO. Alibaba, and it goes on. But what you realize though when you meet these people, when you sit down and talk to the people who start those types of companies, and by the way, like they all start out where everyone else starts out. And that's another, like you hear these criticisms of like, oh, that's easy, you have a really big blog. And it's like, well, I started with 0 readers, just like everybody else. And you find that those thinkers and doers fall into the category of examining the anomalies as opposed to dismissing them. So I think that there are kind of 2 binary choices that you have, and there are probably others. But when you see someone who's doing something that you think is really incredible, you can either build yourself up or tear them down. to make yourself feel better.
Right.
And tearing them down doesn't do anything for you. It's an illusion. And I'm blanking on who said this, but I think it was Carlos Castaneda actually, who said, whether you make yourself happy or you make yourself miserable, the amount of energy required is the same. And so it's like focus on building yourself up. And the way you do that is by asking better questions. And the power of these questions is just incredible. So Peter Thiel, for instance, the first money into Facebook, co-founder of PayPal, co-founder of Palantir, a billionaire many times over. He's a repeat player, and Elon Musk also. The PayPal mafia is pretty amazing, but they've been hitting multiple home runs, and it's not if you're looking at once is lucky, twice you're good. These guys are really good. And one of Peter's favorite questions is, why can't you accomplish your 10-year goal in the next 6 months?
I love that question so much.
And when you apply these ridiculous constraints, your thinking has to change. You can't just upshift one gear. You have to get an entirely new car to think about that, so to speak. And there are all sorts of other questions, like what is one thing you believe that other people think is crazy, which is a great interview question.
Yeah, after reading that in his book, 0 to 1, I started asking people that. I got terrible answers, by the way. I don't know if you've had better luck.
Well, but you're only fishing for one good answer. That's the thing, right? So, for instance, when I talk to, so I had Laird Hamilton as one of my coaches for surfing, which is insane. That guy, oh my God, impressive. Gives me a lot to aspire to. And the undisputed king of big wave surfing, really phenomenal. Or Marcelo Garcia, right? 10-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's considered the Michael Jordan plus Wayne Gretzky plus Mike Tyson of the sport. He was one of the teachers on the TV show. And these guys just do not accept the shoulds and the musts at all. So you want to look for the odd behaviors that produce good results and that can be replicated. So for instance, if you want to become a world-class learner, treat reality as negotiable, because ultimately what we have to do, what we should do, are usually a very fragile collection of just socially reinforced beliefs. And just because something is said often does not make it true. Like, it takes a lifetime to learn a language. Complete nonsense. Adults can learn languages 5 to 10 times faster than children, period. Kids just don't have jobs and mortgages. It's like, that's it. But neurologically, very, very easy. I'll give you another quick example, because people are like, oh, well, 10,000 hours this, 10,000 hours that, which is a theory, guys, by the way, not a rule. But it's like, if you wanted to take your breath hold, as I did, from say 45 seconds to 3 minutes and 33 seconds, you can do that in about 15 or 20 minutes of training. Did that with David Blaine. It's really easy. That's pretty dangerous. So I don't necessarily, I lost my color vision at about like 2.5 minutes, which is not the best feeling. But, or like if you want to double or triple your reading speed, you can do that in 10, 15 minutes. And you can just search speed reading my name. There's a free article on it. So what I love to do more than anything else is to like demonstrate very quickly for someone why something cool that they think is impossible is not only possible, but possible in like 15 to 20 minutes. And they go, whoa. And you look at their brain kind of digest what just happened. And I'm like, okay. So if that impossible is possible, what are the other impossibles in your life that you haven't tested, right? That, for me, is just ultimate fun.
Still ahead on Inside Quest.
I am stumbling all the time, but because I try to train myself to view it like a scientist would, which is, there's no failed experiment, there's only feedback.
Inside Quest continues right now.
So you've talked a lot about the difference between being efficient and something actually being important.
Yeah, being effective.
How do you decide what to learn?
I decide what to learn. I try a lot of stuff. And generally, if I will try to learn something if I think I have some weird predisposition for it. Or
from an exploit your strength standpoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like when I started to do ages ago, I went to Argentina. This is the sort of the trip that formed the basis of the 4-Hour Workweek. When I had a nervous breakdown, my girlfriend left. I was like, this sucks. My life is terrible, and I split to travel the world for 4 weeks, turned into 18 months. Ended up in Argentina, and did not want to do tango. I just thought like True Lies, like the flower in the mouth. I was like, not interested. Like, I just thought, shall we dance, sequined outfits. I was like, not for me. But it was so hot in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and so I went into a tango CD shop just to get away from the heat. It was air conditioned. And then this woman was just this older woman, chain smoking, was like haranguing me because I was just walking around not buying anything. I was like, all right, I'll take your tango class. And I went upstairs and took the class, and I was like, so this is where all the beautiful women hang out. Look at that. And turns out that sort of social tango is all improvised. And I took a class, and for whatever reason, like the wrestling and judo background translated really well, just like the weight shifting. And I was like, wow, I think I could be really good at this. And so I got to the World Championships and made it to the semifinals 6 months later. But the other type of skill is where I do something and I'm like, this scares the shit out of me. And it's really hard. And I'm like, okay. Eleanor Roosevelt, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt said, every day do something that scares you.
Right.
And I really feel like your success in life can be measured, and I've said this before, by the number of uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have, but also the number of uncomfortable experiences you subject yourself to.
Right.
Like practice fear, and you'll get better at acting in the face of fear. Right? And I like quotes, so I'll give you one more. I think it's Cus D'Amato, so Mike Tyson's trainer, who said, he would say this to Mike too, because Mike was always terrified before a fight. He's like, do you know what makes the hero different from the coward? And he's like, they feel the same thing. It's how the hero responds that's different. So I want to practice fear. In the same way that I rehearse poverty a lot, that's kind of a stoic thing, but just so I'm not afraid of it. And so I can make decisions, take risks. The practicing of fear allows your comfortable sphere of action to do this. So if I find something that's really tough, but like kind of exciting, but scary to me, like acro yoga is this kind of a new obsession of mine, which is like Cirque du Soleil performances, like doing handstands on other people's hands and doing all sorts of crazy leg balancing and hand balancing. It's really cool stuff.
Do you know Ferriss Sahabi? He's one of the preeminent jiu-jitsu MMA coaches, quite frankly.
Yeah, I do. I've seen videos.
Trained George St. Pierre,
Yep.
Or trains. And I had the absolute honor to roll with him exactly once. And I walked away from that going, wow, it's kinetic chess. And there was something that connected my mind and my body in a way that nothing else has. I mean, and truly nothing, by the way. And because there's such a strategic agenda to it, and you have to marry that strategic agenda and moving carefully from one position to another to ultimately get the person where you want them. It was the single most bizarre physical experience of my life because it brought two things smashing together with such visceral energy. And I had never rolled before, so I was like, whoa.
That's a hell of a way to start.
Yeah, and it was for sure. And I think that a large part of it was training with somebody that's that high level. And he knew what
things
things have to try.
Before he told you should tap to get out of that?
No, thankfully. Very, very gracious.
Sorry, we were missing a little preamble.
Oh, my bad. Yeah.
I mean, because the mind and body are one and the same. And we talk about mind and body as if they're two separate things, but the brain is an organ, subject to all of the same biochemical limitations and parameters as the body. So it's like, you want to optimize your brain. People ask me all the time, like, what's your favorite smart drug? I'm like, well, I don't really like pill popping, the prescription weirdness, off-label use stuff too much anymore. I mean, I've done all that and I've tried everything. So yes, I can talk to it, but it's like these days, a lot of my favorite smart drugs per se are things that people use for athletics. Creatine monohydrate.
Really?
It's
You find that impacts cognitive function?
100%.
Really?
Yeah.
And I've taken my fair share of creatine. I've never.
Well,
do you think other things have to?
It depends a lot, and of course, I do a lot of blood testing so that I understand where I am at any one given point. Like my snapshots, and I have multiple snapshots so I can trend, but it depends on how much creatine you have in your system.
I was just going to ask that.
So for instance, I'm on a ketogenic diet right now, which means I'm consuming probably 80% of my calories from fat, 15% or probably 15% from protein, and then 5% or fewer calories from carbohydrates. And in that scenario, I'm consuming some red meat, but not a lot. So I'm not, from a dietary standpoint, consuming a lot of creatine. So I take that to cover my bases from a cognitive standpoint. And there's been some research, people can look for this, to show that, for instance, vegetarians can improve their IQ by taking creatine independently.
Really?
Because they so often have a deficiency or at least from the standpoint of an omnivore, a deficit of dietary creatine.
Wow.
And very promising for potentially staving off neurodegenerative disease, right? And so I'll use something like that. Or I'll just consume dietary fat. I'm like, yeah, you want to feel like a rock star. You could take modafinil and all of these things, which have very potential significant downsides. Or you could take like pu-erh tea. Well, you pick your tea of choice. I like mixing pu-erh plus a turmeric and ginger tea from Rishi. I will steep that, and then I'll put in 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. It's like most people, especially if they're trying to follow a low-fat diet, when they have that, they'll be like, oh my God, I suddenly feel like myself again.
Yeah. Going back to the show, you're obviously putting these skills to the test, some of them in pretty risky states. Are you familiar with Chick Set Me High? And flow
I
state?
totally heard that the wrong way first. I was like, Chick sent you high? That is awesome. I have, yes, flow. I'm familiar with him in the book.
Now, was that something you tried to employ to learn so quickly?
I'm fascinated by the concept of flow. So I read Flow a long time ago, and I've also looked at some of the work done by Stephen Kotler and the Flow Genome Project and the rise of Superman, all of which I find very, very fascinating. I think that if we define flow as a state of effortless production, where time seems to fly by, in my experience, it's very personal. The catalysts and the triggers tend to be very personal. I do think there are certain activities that have a higher batting average than others. Physical exercise, by far. And there's a book called Spark. You don't have to read the whole book, but it's about how certain types of exercise, and I think in fact most, will, even if you have no desire or don't care about your physical performance, you just want to perform better mentally, exercise, and it can be very brief, will increase the production of, say, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Just hormonally, it takes like a cocktail of goodness and just pours it onto your brain, which is great. So I would say exercise is definitely one, but for instance, I've noticed that most prolific writers tend to do their best synthesis, their best work between the hours of, let's say, 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., which is not too surprising because everyone else is asleep and they have fewer interruptions. But that generally means people stay up really late, which has been my approach, or they wake up really early. And so I had my routine, my ritual. This is where I think the power of rituals is very important. So how do you minimize decision fatigue? You create routines, right? So the first hour of my day, the last hour of my day is scripted to the point where if it were in a movie, like you could read along with me at like a table read, you'd be like, and then Tim enters the dark bathroom and puts the Epsom salts into his bath, which is 3/4 full, like to a T.
Right.
And
what are you trying to use those for triggers for?
I am using those to, in the morning it's for productivity, in the evening it's for winding down and turning off the problem-solving apparatus that I've historically had a lot of trouble turning off.
Right.
And that's pretty much it. But yeah, the flow in the zone it's very challenging in a way to achieve in a short period of time, like 3 to 5 weeks, although I did hit it in a few instances, because I think flow is so dependent on subconscious reflex and decision making, which I think takes more sleep cycles. So if you're consolidating memory during, this is a theory that's fairly common at least, during REM sleep. Well, one of the constraints you have then as to how much you can learn over a short period of time is how many sleep cycles you have, right? And if you viewed your REM sleep as like a librarian coming in and be like, oh my God, like Ferris put back every book out of order. Now I have to put this back in order in like the Dewey Decimal System so that things can be found again and retrieved quickly. You need those sleep cycles. So, I mean, I kind of cheated in the sense that I would take a little bit of huperzine A, a supplement that's acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, before I went to sleep, which is believed by some and by me, just based on empirical data, to increase the percentage of your sleep that's REM. But ultimately, I think to really hit flow consistently in, say, surfing or poker or some of the crazier stuff I was doing, like urban escape and evasion, like lock picking and all this, all that stuff, with the fine motor skills in particular, you need more sleep cycles to really get that to a point where it's below the surface of your conscious decision making.
You say that you'd like to break your time up into 3 things: fun, revenue, and legacy. Mm-hmm. What do you want your legacy to be?
Just to have like an army to rival Genghis Khan's of world-class learners.
Nice.
Yeah. Who can do whatever they set out to do. Yeah.
That's badass.
Yeah.
I like that.
Benevolent army that propagates itself, that can never be killed. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Tim, man, thank you so much for being on this. This was absolutely incredible to have you here. I think everybody here wants to be a part of your army, the legion that will be the unstoppable machine of learning. So we're all on board with that. It's absolutely fantastic. I totally share that mission. Thank you again for everything you've contributed to this company, teaching us about the 1,000 true fans, bringing more value to somebody's life than anybody else, that everything you've ever wanted to learn is written down, and for always, and I mean always, giving advice that's actually usable. So thank you. Guys, come back through this episode. Make sure you write down all those nuggets of gold. There were many, many. Tim, where can we find you online?
Best place right now is going to be itunes.com/Tim Ferriss. And lots of goodies, including some free stuff there. And you can also go to 4hourworkweek, all spelled out, .com, FOUR, and so on, .com.
Perfect. If you haven't already seen it, be sure to check out the trailer for a show. It's absolutely amazing. I'm sure that all 13 episodes are going to be killer. They're doing it just like House of Cards, so they're all available on iTunes right now. Right now. So go check it out. We will see you next time. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. This is a weekly show. We will bring back more amazing people for you. All right, guys. Till next time. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Tim, my man, truly, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.